Hello, listeners. It's Mallory Wilsey, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to tell you about another show on our podcast network that I think you'll love. Visionary Voices, the College President's Playbook, is an insightful podcast dedicated to the strategic minds leading today's higher ed institutions. Each episode brings a unique perspective from visionary and tech-forward college presidents, chancellors, and other high-level academic leaders, diving into the complexities and nuances of running a modern educational institution. This show is hosted by Dr. Brian Gross, Vice President for Enrollment Management and Athletics at Hartwick College, and is a valuable resource for current and aspiring leaders in academia, offering a playbook of visionary ideas and practical solutions for the ever-evolving landscape of higher ed. New episodes drop every other Wednesday, and you can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Visionary Voices wherever you get your podcasts.
All these people want and all this generation wants is support. And I think it's really easy for people in a closer age gap to be able to build that confidence and that trust. But I think as long as you're leading with the idea that this is a generation that's very emotionally intelligent and understands that feelings that are okay and they're more comfortable with talking about their feelings than older generations are, and being able to have those conversations can be super, super important.
Welcome to Mission Admissions, a podcast that helps higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and leaders. I'm your host, Jeremy Tiers, and every other week I'll share my candid conversations with industry leaders and difference makers from both inside and outside of higher ed. You'll walk away with advice, tips, and strategies to help you both professionally and personally. Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tiers, and this is episode 42 of the Mission Admissions podcast. I've had the opportunity to chat with a number of talented admissions leaders, and I've been wanting to bring on a young professional who is in their first year as an admissions counselor, because I'm sure, as many of you know, half of all of the counselors at colleges and universities right now have less than 2 years of experience. And on top of that, almost half of those counselors are in their 20s, including my guest today, Lucy Coopman from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. Last month, I was at the GPACAC-MOACAC conference, and I want to compliment you, Lucy, as we start, because I've been to dozens of conference sessions over the years, and it's not very often that you see a counselor with less than a year of experience presenting or co-presenting as you did, let alone keeping the audience engaged and sharing content that's not just helpful but fun. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm excited to be here.
You were in high school at one point, and I'm sure you had all kinds of, here's what I'm going to do when I graduate high school. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say admissions counselor probably either wasn't on the list or wasn't at the top of the list. So what kind of careers were you thinking about those last couple of years in high school when you knew you wanted to go to college?
Yeah, when I was in high school, I was pretty dead set on engineering. Like, I had taken all of the engineering courses at my high school, and that was the main program reason of why I chose K-State, because I wanted to go to an engineering school. And that lasted all but of a semester. And I realized that I just had this very fortunate skill of being able to communicate with people and having those relationships. And I just wanted to be able to utilize that in a different way. So I ended up switching from engineering to sociology. And then I was at this phase in my life where I really wanted to work in law enforcement. I was doing that for a couple of years and was pretty steadfast with that up until about COVID happened, and just all of the things surrounding that. in the law enforcement spectrum of things. And I thought that maybe, this might not be the right path for me. I think a lot of people can relate. And I just think to myself, what am I going to do with this degree that I was getting for a whole nother career that I don't even think I want to do anymore? And it's like late in the game. But since my freshman year, I had been involved in our leadership studies minor pretty heavily. So my senior year, I was a TA for my professor and helping teach the freshman intro level class, and it was something that I really, really enjoyed. And my professor was a really huge mentor for me in that aspect of things, and really pushed me towards more of a college and career centric side because he really saw that I had this ability to be able to get others to think about themselves in a way that maybe they haven't initially thought about themselves. And that's where I really enjoyed my time in college, was creating relationships with people younger than me in a TA situation, or other friends or other people in my classes. That's where I ended up getting a job with K-State College Advising Corps. So straight out of college, I went to go work in a Kansas City high school in the counseling department as a college advisor. So essentially, what a counselor would do, but just having their work for them. So my entire cohort was that senior class, and talking to every single one of those students through the year and finding out what they wanted to do post high school, whether that was college or not college, and just kind of helping them figure it out along the way. So that was a 2-year service term in that high school. And through that, I started working with a lot of college admissions reps, right? So coming to schools, doing rep visits, scheduling campus visits and college fairs, and I got to know quite a few of them. And UMKC is this really great university in downtown Kansas City that provides a lot of really great opportunities for students. And I got to know that admissions team pretty well. And so when it came time for me to start looking for a new career, that one kind of opened up, and it was a great stepping stone for me and all of the things that I was already passionate about, but just taking it to that college side of things versus the high school side of things.
So then you start out as an admissions counselor in 2023. What's the biggest thing? Because I'm sure you had an idea of, okay, this is what I think the job's going to be like, or I've heard things from different counselors that when you were in that job corps position you were interacting with. What's the biggest thing that surprised you in those first few months when you started as a counselor?
For me, like, relationships are such a huge thing in my job and a core piece of why I do what I do. So, coming into an admissions counselor's role, I knew the background and the core of why these students want what they want. But when you move to the admissions counselor side, like I said, everything is such a quick turnaround. So instead of having months at a time to be able to really get to know these students and understanding their experiences and their background as an admissions counselor, you're kind of forced to have those quick connections. And like you talked about, how do you make that impression on them in a span of 10 minutes versus 6 months, right? So that's probably been the biggest thing that surprised me. And the thing that I've had to work on the most is how to um, kind of 180 that relationship skill and conversation skill, and just moving it towards that kind of an aspect.
How have you been able to, we'll say, speed up the relationship building process?
That ties a lot into the conversation topic that we had at the conference, is just you truly have to understand these students and the values that they have, because the information that you're bringing to the table on your university, I view it as a backup, right? That information's always going to be there, but it's how do you differentiate yourself in that conversation to be able to make that connection with the student. And for me, the one that I really utilize the most is that authenticity piece, right? Because if I'm bringing 100% of myself and I have no falsities in who I'm bringing or talking to this person and trying to make that connection, that really establishes that trust that these students need as a generation to be able to feel confident in the choice that they're making. Because for a lot of these students, it's kind of on them. They might not have someone in their corner to help them make these decisions. So the more that I can build a rapport in that student with the fact that I know I'm being 100% my authentic self, those students want a piece of that. They're going to be able to kind of gravitate towards you because they want to feel confident in their decision as well. So it's understanding that the confidence in yourself is going to help you be able to differentiate yourself when you're making those connections with students. So it's not all about the university and XYZ of this statistic and this program. And yes, that's a part of it, 100%. You want to be able to give this transparent information, but it's like you said, it's creating the meaningful connections. It's talking about the experiences that you've had and the things you like, and maybe making a kid smile versus just giving them a pamphlet, because that's what they're going to remember.
Where does your confidence come from?
That's such a hard question to answer. I think confidence is a really, really long path that you have to start on somewhere. um, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, and just especially in our office, on just like a public speaking standpoint. I'm very comfortable with public speaking. It's never been something that I've really been afraid of. But I think for a lot of people, that is a very scary topic to think about. And what it wires down to is confidence. And it doesn't have to be seen in this egocentric way. It's a confidence in knowing what your motivation is and what your goal is, and understanding that you don't have to care what the end result is going to be, as long as that you gave it 100%. You gave it all that you could. So for me, confidence, it comes from that public speaking aspect. It comes from the work that I've done personally to understand my own values. Um, and for me, if I know that I'm being 100% myself, there's nothing that I have to regret. And I think that's a huge weight lift off of some people's shoulders too, is, oh, I could have done this right, or maybe I didn't say the wrong answer. But if I know who I am and what I'm bringing to the table, there's really nothing I need to regret, because there's nothing that I'm hiding. So I think confidence is a long, long line of work and progression on yourself. But I think a lot of it is self work and really reflecting on, why are you doing what you're doing, right? What is your why? Understanding that, it's a very, very good first step. And then understanding how you can utilize it in not only your career, but your personal life and the skills and the hobbies that you do. And the more you can build up yourself and understanding why you're doing what you're doing, I think that translates to a variety of things, not even just the professional skill.
I love how you put that, and it gets me back to the idea of just mindset. And you don't hear a lot of 20 something professionals in any industry, I would argue, let alone higher ed, I think, talk about it the way you just did. And so I'm wondering, was there a teacher, was there a parent, a family member, like, did somebody come to you and essentially at some point in your life that you remember, Lucy, go, at the end of the day, Lucy, it's about, did you prepare? Did you do everything you could do? Did you, or to your point, did you hear it somewhere or read it in a book? Like, do you remember kind of where that comes from?
I think I can relate to you in the fact that I come from this very athletic background and doing a lot of sports and having a responsibility and accountability with those types of situations. Um, the thing that my dad used to tell me growing up as a kid is there's only two things that you can control in your life, no matter if it be sports or something different, and that's your effort and that's your attitude, right? And anything else that happens, it's out of your control, and you just have to accept that. I think about joining a sorority in college and like being surrounded by a bunch of really great and powerful women that accept you for who you are, and you don't have to worry about being something else. And especially for this generation, you think about just the conformity of it all and wanting to fit into a certain mold, I think is where a lot of young people struggle. And it's hard. It's hard to take the step back and think to yourself, I don't have to be this perfect person all the time, and that's okay. Because we're kind of force fed that from a very, very young age. And I mean, that's just a part of growing up that I think anybody can realize is you don't have to be this special format or this special person to feel successful or to feel loved or to feel supported in any way. I think that just ties back to the confidence piece as well.
So you start having these conversations with students who are only a few years younger than you. Anything that just, because you were so authentic, really took you by surprise in terms of, and again, I'm not asking you to reveal anything in confidence, but just were there any questions that you got initially, or just because you were easy to talk to, where you're like, wow, the fact that this student is asking me this, I mean, I didn't see that coming.
I mean, when I first started that job, it was oh, are you a high school student too? Right? So
Mhm.
it's, wearing your badge and being comfortable with the fact that, yeah, I'm close to your age, but like, I'm still like someone who's here to help you, right? So the near peer thing, what I really appreciate is I just went through what you're about to go through, okay? So my experiences are going to be fairly similar to what you're about to do. Um so yes, there's times where they feel super comfortable to share those things with you because they feel like they can relate to you. And you kind of have to draw that line of, yes, I'm here to like be your friend or like have these conversations with you, but you have to draw that line and understand that I'm also in an authority position, and understanding that I think Gen Z can respect that, right? As long as you're leading with empathy to be able to understand that these people are just human beings wanting to share some things about themselves, and kind of backtracking and like, okay, well, how can we fix it or how can we support that? Because all these people want and all this generation wants is support. And I think it's really easy for people in a closer age gap to be able to build that confidence and that trust. But I think as long as you're leading with the idea that this is a generation that's very emotionally intelligent and understands that feelings that are okay and they're more comfortable with talking about their feelings than older generations are, and being able to have those conversations can be super important. So yes, I have had conversations with students that kind of get into the nitty gritty of their lives, which is so cool. I love to hear it, but also remember that like I work at your high school type of a situation. So it's been an interesting navigation of that process for sure. But it's something that I think is a really great skill and benefit to have in this line of work, because it, like I said earlier, it allows you to be able to differentiate yourself and create those connections with students so that they can remember you and not just think of the 5-minute pitch that you gave them.
Do you ever worry about being unprofessional?
I like humor. I really do. And it's something, a skill that I use when I'm connecting with my students. I don't like to keep things so serious all the time, and a broad sense. Like, obviously, if you're doing an important presentation, you're going to keep it serious. But I think for me, the fact that I love humor and I love to connect with people on things that maybe aren't so professional all the times in the sense of the word, of whether that's pop culture or things that are happening right now, I think that can be seen as unprofessional in a sense, but I also think it's a really great benefit to be able to create connections with people.
No, I agree. And I talk a lot. I hear this less from Gen Z counselors, Lucy, and more from people who are either, in their 30s, 40s, or older who are in admissions recruitment roles. And they're like, but Jeremy, I'm in a professional role. I can't get down on their level. And I'm like, you have to get down on their level to be believable and relatable. And that's what they need you to be. And that doesn't make you unprofessional. Again, I make it clear. I'm like, I don't ever want you to be like, Lucy, bro, like, I don't want you to
Yes.
do that. That's not what I'm telling you to do. I'm telling you to do the things that you've already talked about, Lucy, which is just be empathetic and be nice and understand this is a hard, scary, confusing process, and they don't know where to start, and they've got all, and that's harder to do, right? Isn't it? If you're not relatable and believable.
Yeah, and that's understanding language, that's understanding your student, that's understanding the environment that they're in, and that's just a whole nother piece of the job is, and especially for me in this first year, I have 30, 40 different high schools that I'm going to, and every set of students, every group of students at that high school is different. So what am I bringing to the table? What type of connection pieces am I bringing with me that's going to be able to relate to these students in a way that's different from the high school before that I just went to? So that's a whole other piece to the puzzle for sure, is just knowing your audience.
It's been the hardest habit for you to break this year.
It can be so easy to fall into a script, right? And just one after the other, and it can get tiring. And I think that's when you really have to step back and think about, okay, what am I really trying to do here? For example, and this is such a weird example, I just moved. So I had to call my internet service to get hooked up because it wasn't working right. And those are like the most scripted jobs you could ever have. And I talked to this man, and instead of, walking me through steps 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to remember this for the longest time, he's like, "Oh, have you seen the movie Lucy with Scarlett Johansson?" And like starts having this whole conversation with me about random movies and things like that. And I was like, "Thanks, man. Like, I really appreciate you helping me today," because he took the time to be able to have that connection with me and didn't only care about my internet service, which was great. Like, it's up and working now, but those are the connections that you remember.
110%. I tell people the fastest way, whether you're 24 years old and an admissions counselor or 54 years old and an admissions recruiter, to get a young person to talk to you is not to talk about your school at all.
Not at all. 100%. Totally agree.
So you talked about all these high schools that you're responsible for in your territory.
Hey, it's Mallory. Exciting news! I'm hosting the Engage Summit in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Together, we'll dive into the mind of the modern student, what fires them up, how they interact, and what they expect in today's digital age, and how tools like AI help put them in the driver's seat of their education. We have some terrific speakers, including our closing keynote, New York Times best-selling author Jeff Selingo. Sessions will dig into practical ideas and innovative strategies to get your team more student-centered and ready to adopt AI. And many of your favorite Enrollify hosts are presenting too, like Jamie Hunt, Jenny Lee Fowler, and Brian Gross. Use the discount code Enrollify50 for an extra $50 off your registration. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there.
I would love to get your take as somebody who's not that far removed from the whole college search process yourself, but as somebody who now is traveling to all these high schools. When you do specifically high school visits, and for example, they stick you in the lunchroom or next to the lunchroom, Lucy, what do you do in a situation like that? Because, I constantly am hearing people say, well, it's just a complete waste of my time to go to a high school if I can't be in a classroom or if I can't be in a, place in the college and career center or whatever the name is of the building or the office. So if they stick you, for example, and you have to do like a lunchroom type visit, I mean, how do you say, all right, here's how I'm going to attack that in a way that benefits me and benefits students?
Lunchroom visit. So once again, this is a two-parter. I think one, it's knowing your audience in your school. For some schools, lunch visits are super great and students are used to them and they come up to your table and they ask you questions. And for other schools, I can understand why some people might think it's a waste of time. There's been plenty of instances where I call it the billboard effect. And yeah, maybe I didn't talk to 10 students that day, but I go and look online and we got 3 applications after my visit, right? And I think that's part of Gen Z maybe not being comfortable with coming up and talking to a random stranger, which I totally understand. But how do you get their attention, right? That's the question that we're asking. I think a lot of it is your tabling and what you're bringing to the school. Are you bringing things that are going to catch their attention, right? Whether that's, a sticker or a freebie. I've seen a lot more universities start using technology pieces because that's what Gen Z is interested in. So whether it's, a slideshow of pictures of your campus or a video of the student experience, if you can have something visually eye-catching, that's what's going to get them to stop by your table. I also think, another part of that is just being kind of willing to stand up and give somebody a compliment that walks by or ask them what they're eating for lunch, right? How are you going to be able to pull them in? For us at UMKC, right, we've got all this Taylor Swift hype all of a sudden. So I was in Denver, Colorado, and trying to get students to come talk to me who didn't necessarily know what UMKC was. Saw a girl wearing a Taylor Swift t-shirt. I said, "Hey, come here. You might see her one day on campus," or something randomly. So it's making random connections. It's having that eye-catching piece, and it's okay with being okay if someone just completely blows you off. And I think that's a part of sales in general. You have to be okay with no's and okay with the people, completely ignoring you, because you might have that billboard effect. Like, yes, you were there and they didn't talk to you, but maybe they went home and decided to look you up on the computer and then thought they were interested.
So you get to this point, and obviously, as we all know, this is a totally different kind of year with all the financial aid delays behind FAFSA and everything else. But obviously, regardless of if the FAFSA had been running like it was supposed to run this year, you were going to have to start having conversations with 18, 17-year-olds and their parents about financial aid. Walk me through knowing that was going to be a core part of your job. Were you excited? Were you extremely nervous? And like,
Mm,
how have you been able to navigate those
yeah.
in terms of like, hey, what's working for you and what's not working for you? Or what did you try and you're like, boy, I wish I had known this ahead of time, because yeah, I definitely won't do that again.
I knew it was going to be an issue because I started in the summer and that's all they were talking about. Um, in FAFSA and finances and tuition, it's always a heavy topic, no matter if FAFSA's messed up or not. That's starting with transparency. That's starting with honesty and understanding that this is a big investment for a lot of people, and not to downplay that is huge, right? Like, college is not something that everybody's doing all the time for this exact reason. So with FAFSA and with financial aid, it's understanding that you have to view it in terms of an investment. And I think you also have to understand FAFSA as a whole. Luckily for me, in my past job, I was like FAFSA expert. So I was doing it with students, I was doing it with families. So I kind of had a background knowledge on how it all worked. But I think anytime that you can sign up for a FAFSA seminar virtually or get a newsletter and just stay up to date with what is happening, especially with all of these changes, because you don't want to be seen as an admission counselor who knows nothing about financial aid if they ask you. So no, that's not specifically my job, but I feel like I have enough training and enough information from my department to be able to stay on top of it. Um, and on top of that, and just making families comfortable, I think as much, and this is really, really important, as much as you have to realize that this is a really big moment for these students and the transitions of these lives, you have to realize that this is a really, really big moment for these parents as well. And I know parents can be kind of a tough thing to go around and talk to them, but they're nervous and they're scared just as much as these kids. This is their little baby. This is the first time they're spending this much money. And you have to be empathetic towards that and understanding where they're coming from, and taking the time to break it down so they understand, loans and how that works, and this is the most you can take out, and XYZ. So as long as you're willing to have those conversations with families and be empathetic towards their situations, I don't think FAFSA has to be such a scary thing to talk about. As long as you're terming it and talking to them, and that it is an investment in the student's future and there are ways to help them pay for it, I don't think it has to be such a scary thing.
How important do you think, because I got to believe you've had conversations with other admissions counselors, not just at UMKC, right? Not only in your time with Job Corps, but now in this role in your travel. How important do you think then Gen Z, we'll call it admissions reps, value one-on-one meetings with their supervisor?
I think the value behind the one-on-one meetings ties back to the purpose and the meaningful work that you're doing. Because if Gen Z feels like what they're doing is such the same thing over and over again, or I'm not increasing in any way, that's where you're going to lose them. That's where they're going to go into a flow. That's where they're not going to be as interested in what they're doing. If you can give them opportunities to really excel in their skills or develop in their skills, whether that be the day to day work or something new, I think that's really key, because Gen Z is very, very interested in what is next. And if you can guide them towards that, I think that's a really, really great managing skill to have.
So let's expand on that for a minute if you're willing to,
Sure.
do that with me. How then, if I'm a leader listening to this, do I approach, for example, a brand new admissions counselor who may work extremely hard, super nice, does all the things we ask, and then 12 to 18 months in looks and is sitting here expecting either a promotion, a title change, a raise, whatever it might be. And maybe the school or maybe this, leadership person does not have the ability to do that. How do you not lose that staff member and keep them focused on the bigger picture?
That's tough. How do you keep them? I think it's building value within office culture. I think it's celebrating successes, whether those are small or little. I think it's being willing to do the small things for that person. Hey, can I help you out with something? Or, hey, how's this going? Do you need any extra hands? Support is huge. And I think for an employee who feels like they have that person that has their back no matter what, that's huge. Because you're not going to get that with every job. You're not going to get that with every supervisor. So you want the meaningful work. Yes, that's one half of the equation. The other half of the equation is the office culture, the office environment. And if you can create this environment where people are wanting to come back and people are staying in a positive attitude and a positive day-to-day experience, I think that's something that could be valued. And I think it's underrated a lot of times when people consider what jobs they're going to pursue next. I really, really do.
What do you think the biggest misconception is about Gen Z?
This is a tough one too. Um, I think it's really nuanced because when you think about values for Gen Z and the generalities that people make of, oh, they're lazy, or oh, they're selfish, and you can kind of play both sides of the line, like yes in this sense but no in this sense as well. So I think biggest misconception for Gen Z is just they have this different attitude for work and career that other generations don't. So they're lazy, they don't want to put in the hard work to get what they want. But for Gen Z, they're using different resources and different tools to get what they need. Whether that's online, whether that's social media, whether that's networking, that they're not putting in the hard work that most in the traditional sense can think. They're not putting 10 to 15 years in a job before they expect something. They're going to this conference, they're expanding upon this skill and this training and expecting something a lot quicker than other people are. So it's lazy in the sense that I feel like they don't think that generation sticks around for the end. And that's what it is. But I think Gen Z, like we've talked about, they're so quick and they want the next thing that I think that's why it can be seen as lazy.
So then, if you're comfortable sharing, if your boss came to you or if a senior leader at another school came to you, Lucy, and said, all right, you're a Gen Z admissions counselor. What advice can you give me that will help me retain more of my Gen Z admission staff? What would you tell him or her?
If your job directly correlates to how you are able to penetrate relationships, you have to be able to effectively do those by establishing trust with these people. So I think it's being transparent with that fact of, hey, we know you've worked really hard for this past year, but here's where we're at on the leadership end. And here's how we're going to work. Here's what we're going to do next. I think transparency is really, really key because we want that communication and we want to know what's going on. And that's not always, something that people are so upfront with in terms of managing and what's going on behind the scenes. But as much information as you can give us as possible and keeping us up to date with our progress and keeping us up to date with maybe what we're not doing right, we're going to work towards making that right because we want to. We don't want to be seen as this misconception as being lazy because we don't feel like we're lazy. We really don't. I would say transparency is really key for me, at least. That office culture is a really key part. I think you have to be able to create a plan or create a future for where you see this person being able to go. And if you can't vocalize that, if you don't have a vision for where you see this person being, that's not creating a sense of support. That's not creating a sense of rapport, of being able to be accountable for your employees. That's just seen as you being a supervisor, which is super, front facing. You have to be willing to go a little bit deeper into the future, I think, for these type of employees. I think you also just have to have those notes ready to go of this is what you're doing well. Let's celebrate those small successes. What do you want to stop? What do you want to continue? What do you want to start new? Continuing to ask those questions and being able to push your employees to be able to excel, I think is really, really key. And sometimes that's hard, right? Because not everybody wants to have that little push. And that's where it comes with writing that line of being able to say, yes, I can see that this is hard for you, but I think that this would be really good for you. Because Gen Z can be kind of scared to take that next step and do that next thing when they have all of this years of experience of people just like you and people in authority that have been there for a lot longer than they have. But I think when you take a step back and realize that these people see something in you, that's really cool. That's really, really cool to think about.
I've got one more question now based on something you just said there. How do you help a young person overcome fear, in your opinion? Fear of whatever it might be.
I think it's talking about it. I think it's acknowledging it. Because fear in our society ties really, really close to failure, which I think you know very well about and you talk really well about it. I think failure can be seen as such a negative thing, but it doesn't have to be. You have to see it as a stepping stone, and that fear has to be a stepping stone for you in what is next. Because if you're doing it afraid and if you're doing it with fear, that means you care about it. And if you care about it, that means it's worthwhile. So I think if you truly take that step back to understand why you're doing what you do or why you're being asked to do what you do, it's because they see something in you. And yes, you may be afraid, and yes, you might fail, but that's only going to benefit you in the future for whatever is next.
So I end every podcast, Lucy, with something I call fun rapid fire. So I'm just going to give you 4 or 5 questions, and I want to get some quick feedback on each one, okay? What's the best TV game show out there?
TV game show, Deal or No Deal. The anticipation you get of whether or not they're going to get that money, and it's a classic. And they're expanding it to some island competition, which I am excited to watch.
I'm going to take it by what you said earlier that you're a Taylor Swift fan. So what's your favorite Tay-Tay song, as my daughter would
that's
call her?
Crazy. I'm not a Taylor Swift fan, which is crazy to live in Kansas City and say that. It's not that I'm not a Taylor Swift fan. I love her and Travis together. I am so happy for them, and I want them to get married one day. I think that would be beautiful. But I am not the biggest Taylor Swift fan in terms of music. But my favorite song, classic, You Belong With Me.
What's your favorite place to shop?
Shop, H&M.
Gen Z word or Gen Z phrase that you're like, oh my God, people misuse this so much. They think they're saying this and they have no clue what they're saying.
Someone cooked here, which is usually used in terms of relationships, but people are using it for other things, and I'm like, no, you have to realize what it actually means, because it's just awkward that you're saying that now.
Rumor has it you are, though, a Kansas City Chiefs fan. Do I have that one correct?
Yes, that one is correct.
All right. So what's the record going to be this year? If there's 16, actually there's 17, I think, regular season games this year. What's the record going to be?
I feel like we always start out slow. So I feel like we'll lose probably 2 or 3 in the beginning of the season and maybe 1 towards the end. So maybe a 14-3, 13-4 record. But I'm telling you, I have to start banking on that this team is going to go to the Super Bowl every year, because I never take off work. And I'm like, I have to start doing this ahead of time, even if they don't. So I'm going to ask for PTO for whatever the next Super Bowl date is in February of next year, because I'm banking on it.
And how would your parents describe, Lucy, what you do?
What is my Barbie job, I think is what you're asking. My Barbie job is that I talk. That's my job. I work for a university. I help get students to whatever is going to be next in their life, whether that's UMKC or not. Am I here to help you give all the positive benefits of UMKC? Yes, but I'm also here to make college less of a stressful thing for students.
Thank you so much for being open today and just for sharing so much. I think it's going to help a lot of people, and I appreciate all of your authenticity and look forward to the next time that you and I connect. Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a number of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admission professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Day Cabilds, and so many other amazing leaders in the higher ed space. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create more meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com.